This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogan. This is episode 236 of the podcast, and I am sitting in a very small brew house at the back of the Forager Brew Pub with Austin Jevne. Welcome to the podcast, Austin.
Hey, man. Thanks a lot for having me here. Super pumped.
It's, I think we started talking about this 2 years ago, right as I was planning on coming up to our Minnesota Craft Beer Festival in 2020, and I think I emailed you about that, and we had kind of like, oh yeah, maybe we can make this happen. And then, COVID happened, and then Beer Festival didn't happen. And then 2 years of life just kind of evaporated there.
Yeah, I think we all felt that a little bit. Shockwave went far.
Yes, yeah. But it's exciting to be back in Minnesota. We just, of course, finished up our Minnesota Craft Beer Festival. So I hopped in the car, drove down here to Rochester, Minnesota, and we were sitting in the back of the place where Forager got its start. And Austin, you're the co-founder of Forager, owner and recipe designer for Humble Forager Brewery.
Exactly. It's kind of a mess to say, but there's a long story behind it.
We will get to that long story. It's interesting, and there's certainly legalities involved in that you all have had to navigate. We'll talk about all of that, but first, what if you could chill your beer with a more efficient chiller? The answer: G&D Chillers, new micro-channel condensers. G&D's micro-channel condensers are highly efficient in hotter regions, use a fraction of the refrigerant over traditional chillers, which provides less opportunity for leaks, along with lower global warming potential. G&D Chillers engineers are committed to green technology design while developing a more energy-efficient chiller for the brewing industry. Contact G&D Chillers today at gdchillers.com. Also, this episode is brought to you by BSG, exclusive distributors of Rahr Malting Company. Since 1847, Rahr Malt has been a benchmark of quality and consistency for brewers from 19th century through today's craft beer pioneers. Whether you're creating classic lagers, resin-clouded hazies, or barrel-aged behemoths like they do here at Forager, inspired malts like Rahr North Star Pils, malted oats, and more here to make your brewing dreams a reality. Get in touch today at go.bsgcraft.com/contact-us. And speaking of BSG, we are co-sponsoring the Minnesota Made Party at the legendary First Avenue on Wednesday, May 4th. That's next week if you are listening to this on the Friday when it is released. That party features Trampled by Turtles and a few other Minnesota acts. It's a private event, but if you find me at CBC before the show, I'll have a few tickets for podcast listeners while they last. And quickly, if you're brewing and planning, visit breweryworkshop.com for more information about our upcoming brewery accelerator in Portland, Oregon this July. Okay, Austin, let's talk about Forager. Tell me the story.
Forager basically was a small brew pub idea that I had for a while. And then I finally met my partner in crime here, Annie Henderson. She was the go-getter that got it all done. So she's really the person that made Forager happen. As far as the beer, that was me, Paul Metz, coming around with recipes that we'd been making for a long time in our garage and our back porch. And then he worked professionally up at the Herkimer in the Twin Cities, RIP for that one. And I started working at Rush River Brewing Company in River Falls, Wisconsin, kind of doing QC and packaging stuff. So Forager kind of came from that, and we wanted to make a brew pub instead of a distribution brewery because it would be more of a community focused place. We didn't want to just have it be for beer geeks. We wanted it to be a gathering place for people all over the south of Minnesota, and that's why we did wine, spirits, little coffee bar, and full restaurant as well.
It's fun. I popped in here last night for dinner and I had a few beers, and it's got like an eclectic, almost not I wouldn't call it hipster, but it's like the coolest, hippest bohemian Cracker Barrel that I've found. Like it, just there's that little shop, there's the little to-go spot. It just feels, it's obviously way more fun than Cracker Barrel is. And you don't just do breakfast. So, but it has that vibe. You walk in, you're like, oh, this feels really cool, really fun. But there's a thoughtful kind of, a put together piece to it. It feels like there's a nice creative energy.
That's great. That's what we aimed for. Going with the name Forager wasn't only about foraging ingredients and things out in the wild, but it was also about picking these pieces that were historical relics from Rochester and previous restaurants and businesses that existed in town. So if you're here, you can go around. We have little labels on all the different things that make up our restaurant and our space, and the history of what they were and what they represented in town before we were able to fortunately bring those pieces into our decor.
You foraged the decor.
We foraged the decor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. And so now you also have Humble Forager, and obviously because this is a brew pub, those things can't be connected. And so talk to me about, the relationship of Forager, the brew pub, and Humble Forager, the distribution brand.
Absolutely. I don't want to get into legal laws because everyone will fall asleep and not listen to the rest of the podcast, but make it short and sweet. The archaic Minnesota beer laws don't allow brew pubs to distribute anywhere except off-site from our facility in 750 milliliter vessels and 64-ounce growlers. That's the only size we're allowed to sell. And unfortunately, therefore, we aren't allowed to make beer to sell to our friends. There's been a bunch of people in Minnesota and around the Midwest that were requesting Forager beer on draft and in liquor stores. We tried to change laws with the Brewers Guild here in town and just weren't able to do it. So we kind of pursued a different option and found that if we opened a sister company, contract brewery, we were able to do that, but we had to do it out of state to start in Wisconsin. So then we were able to find a partner in Minnesota as well. So we contract brew at Octopi in Waunakee, Wisconsin, and Fair State Brewing Cooperative up in St. Paul. We make different beers at both locations. But essentially that was our way to get beers out to, our friends and partners in the industry who wanted to carry our beer. The reason we called it Humble Forager is honestly we were just humbled by all the requests that we had gotten for this small little brew pub's beer. We thought that was pretty cool, so we had to add another name onto it to create the sister company and do it distro that way. There was a couple of years of navigating laws, finding different ways to do it, but we ended up being very happy with it, although I did have to give up my shares of Forager to own it because they wouldn't allow me to do both. But that's okay. I still come by and say hi to everybody once in a while.
But between the two brands, you were still a romantic power couple, connected, in those kinds of ways.
Oh, yeah. So Annie is the majority owner here at Forager, and I'm the majority owner of Humble Forager. But, we still go home and share a child, Silas, together. So at the end of the day, we may talk about our businesses sometimes over dinner, but maybe not.
As you all are thinking about it, then, you've got a Humble Forager as a brand has a product strategy that's maybe not exactly the same as Forager the brew pub. Forager the brew pub, is trying to make beers that fit all sorts of different drinkers. You were making everything from Belgian beers. I had some lagers last night, a Doppelbock. Of course you make across both of the Humble Forager and Forager, make hazy IPAs, make other types of IPAs. There's, fruited kettle sour beers, fruited hard seltzers, too, across those. Talk to me about how, how you think about those things and what Humble Forager looks like then. I assume that it's based on what the market wants from you versus what a drinker showing up here in the brew pub might want to drink.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. At Forager, we're really trying to make beer that's food focused. We want people to come in, have a nice meal, and be able to find something that's in a diverse flavor profile that fits our dishes seasonally. And in the Midwest, we have very defined 4 seasons. So we rotate through our beers pretty drastically throughout the season. Some of those kind of tail off into the next season, and then we'll, pull it aside if it's a beer that will age well and bring it back and have those vintages for later on. But yeah, we're really making beer for food here at Forager, based on the fact that we can't distro. That's kind of why we do our mix firm and our barrel age program, because that's our biggest opportunity to do off sale. But with Humble Forager, we make 100 barrel batches of beer, which is a lot of beer to sell. I think I would struggle to sell 100 barrels of Belgian Double out in the wild, because some of the best Belgian doubles in the world don't even sell out in the wild. So
that's true.
We crush through that at Forager. People love our Belgian double. So it's a very, very different kind of process that we're going for and why we design the recipes we do. Humble Forager, was kind of built off the beers that we were able to sell offsite, like in our crowlers and growler program, and what people were requesting. So our kettle sour line called Gummies Make Us Likeable was highly requested. So we developed a line called the Coastal Sunshine or Coastal Sunrise, Coastal Sunset series for Humble Forager, and it's based off a very similar recipe, done in a very similar way as what we do down here at Forager, but just for a larger market. We also did that kind of with our seltzer program, took inspiration from that line, but basically put a cleaner seltzer base behind it rather than a kettle sour to give a gluten-free option out there for people. And we're super focused on local ingredients here. So our Humble Bumble seltzer for Humble Forager uses honey that's sourced from apiary about an hour away from the Forager brew pub. And we buy a couple tons of honey from them every year, which is a really cool partnership that we're able to do for that.
You make a seltzer base with honey?
So the base isn't with honey, but we back sweeten it with honey.
Oh, okay.
So it's a sugar brew, brewed up to about 15%. And at Octopi, what's really, really cool about their facility, if you don't know about them and you're interested in contract brewing, I'll absolutely pump them. They do a fantastic job of almost every style they brew there. And they've got tons of really, really great equipment that we could never afford or fit in our facility at Forager.
Sure.
One of those is a dealkalizer. So if your brand is thinking about making a non-alcoholic product, you should reach out to Octopi because they have one of the nicest dealkalizers out there. And what it can do for our seltzer is we brew it to a really high ABV, then we run it through to strip off all those bad off flavors that we're getting from the high ABV sugar fermentation. And we're left with a really, really clean seltzer base. And then we can back sweeten that with the
also
honey.
leaves it with no yeast, so that when you
absolutely
throw more sugar in there, you're not going to end up with exploding packages.
100%. And that's like kind of the second piece of it. After we fruit it, we let that run through a vacuum pasteurizer, and that also cleans it up, make sure that we're good there.
Yeah.
And then after packaging, it gets the triple threat treatment and goes through a tunnel. So, you know that your
Cleaned
product
up 3 times. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's super shelf stable, and that's something about Humble Forager working with Octopi that's been great for us. It's also been difficult. We've seen a ton of other breweries out there with exploding sour cans on the shelf, and it's really kind of put a bad landscape out there for people who are doing different processes with their sours.
Right.
A lot of people, I think, are assuming that fruited sours have a shelf life similar to hazy IPAs, and absolutely they do from certain breweries. But if you have a process that changes that, we have a shelf life of 18 months with flavor stability on our fruited sours. And people look at our shelf life on the bottom of the cans and get a little worried sometimes. But we've done multiple tests about the longevity of where that flavor is stable, and because of that process, our beers are great, and they can sit in the back of your trunk on a hot Texas summer day, and they're not going to explode. So we're really, really proud of like that process and how that works out there, and it's kind of our job, I feel like, to inform the world that not all fruited sours are made the same. The process variables are what's very different about that, and it just allows us to have a better product, I think, on the shelf.
100%. And I think, we've talked about it on the podcast before, talked about it with Levi Funk of Untitled Art and Funk Factory Guzzeria, who also does brews at Octopi. We've talked about pasteurization with Doug Dozark of Cycle. You hear the horror stories, but really, everyone in this business should treat customers with respect and make sure that they have a product that, the nice way to look at it is treat them with respect. The pragmatic way is, don't make things that blow up on your customers, because your customers may not enjoy your brand quite as much after that experience. That's great that you can get 18 months out of it, though. That's I imagine there's something to that heating process that kind of tempers, that fruit flavor in some sort of way.
That's exactly it. It's kind of the double dip of the vacuum pasteurizer on the front side, and then the tunnel on the back side really helps stabilize that flavor. The only thing that you'll notice is if you had a can that sits somewhere for 6 to 12 months, there's going to be a little bit of like a sediment in the bottom. That's just because we use all real fruit juices and purees and everything. There's nothing artificial in those products, so that's going to settle out a little bit. So you're going to just want to roll that can to kind of bring it back into solution. But other than that, that's really the only thing that we're seeing is your color at the top of the can might be a little bit different than the bottom of the can if it sits there for a while.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about how you use those ingredients. And we will, eventually down the road also talk about barrel aging, because that's something on the Forager side that Forager does a lot of, and he has a very hip reputation for it. We will get to that. Don't you worry. But before we talk about that, looking for innovation in your next beverage breakthrough, think outside the puree box and let your brand stand out with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Even smoothie seltzers can benefit from the extra boost of flavor and color. Old Orchard is based in the greater Grand Rapids, Michigan area, also known as Beer City, USA, and supplies craft beverage categories ranging from beer, wine, and cider to seltzer, spirits, and kombucha. To join the core of Old Orchard's brewing community, learn more at oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, Arrived mobile point of sale powers places with personality. Arrived is streamlining business operations for the makers of craft with an all-in-one solution that was built with love by hospitality professionals. No contracts and no monthly fees make Arrived a no-brainer for your craft business. Go to arrived.com/CBB. That's CBB as in craft beer and brewing, to set up a free customized demo. That's Arrived, ARRYVED.com/CBB. A different kind of POS has arrived. So let's talk about building these flavorful, fruity beers, Austin. Clearly, it's something that you all have done well, and it's something that the market around the country now, because I think, we even get them from time to time out there in Colorado where I am. And of course, you all have sent them to us. I think we've reviewed some in the magazine in the past too. Big, beautiful, bold, but also kind of complex fruit mixtures. You all you love to kind of flex on some of those fruit combinations. So talk to me about that creative process behind designing some of these fruity beers.
Yeah, so kind of where a lot of our recipes are designed is based off of experiences that I've had out in the world and things that I've tasted. And I feel like there's a lot of really good options for people to, buy what's easy and source some from really great companies that have a similar fruit than each other, but to reach out there and find unique fruits that are harder to source, and then also understand their flavor profiles and what their impact's going to be on the final product is like a challenge for me that I take a lot of passion in. And I also really want to introduce people to these new fruits that exist around the world that they may have never heard of before. One of them, for example, is the calamansi lime. And it was something that Timmy up at Barrel Theory Brewing Company in the Twin Cities had introduced me to. And I was blown away by this citrus fruit. I was like, I'll never use key lime again. I don't need that product. When you got calamansi, you've got it all. So I got to give a shout out to Timmy, Barrel Theory, for turning me onto that fruit, because it really kind of changed our whole flavor profile and some of the citrus tones we go for. And it was really hard to find it. When he introduced me to it, I was like, hey, where are you getting this? And he's like, I get these little 32-ounce frozen bottles of it. And, we dump a bunch of these. I get 300 of them. But when you're making 100-barrel batch of beer, you can't bring in 3 pallets of 32-ounce bottles and dump them into the tank. It doesn't work that way. So we spent a lot of time trying to source that fruit, and I found a guy with WA Imports down in Chicago, and he brings in all sorts of really, really awesome fruit. And what they did is they were like, you need this much? I don't know if we can produce that. But I was like, yeah, I'll buy all this stuff, just make it happen by these dates. And he sent me up some samples, and I was blown away by it. So we got kumquat from them last year, and this Japanese calamansi lime, which is just absolutely killer. So that's kind of like,
hope you have contracts if you're mentioning the name of this importer.
Yeah, I've given that name to a couple other friends of mine. Now, whoever listens to this podcast, WA Imports. Yeah, get ready for some big orders. They do charge a premium for it. That's the difference is there's a lot of different fruit sources out there that you can get for pretty cheap. But when I taste these samples of fruits, there's ones that are a lot better than others. This year in particular, blackberry was really hard to find good blackberry. A couple people I know I've tasted really great blackberry beers out there, and they probably got that right away because everything else was outrageously expensive and the quality was low. We can thank the heat wave out in the Pacific Northwest for the damage to that.
Thanks global warming for fucking up the barley crop, fucking up the smoke tainting hops, killing our fruits. Great.
It's a brutal year, honestly, for brewers to source the proper ingredients for making things price competitive.
Right.
But that's another piece of it. It's like we want to search out these unique fruits, but we want to also buy the best fruits we can. And that's why our products are a premium price, is because we don't want to just put something in there and say, oh, we found blackberry. It doesn't really taste like blackberry. It's super sour. It has none of the characteristics we want, but we're committed to making this brand. We don't do that. We'll pull it off the schedule and wait for another year in the future where maybe that comes around and we start to see the fruits that we want. So we kind of focus on what we can get that's super high quality, that tastes great that year. And the big piece of it for Humble Forager, and the same at Forager, is using all real fruits. We don't use artificial flavorings in anything to kind of like put an accent on it. We rely solely on the fruit and the flavor of that fruit to produce all those flavors and aromas. And with that, I feel that we're able to act as kind of like a chef, layering flavors, where if you mess around with artificial stuff and you can nail it, good for you. You've worked with a lab to design those flavors to work. I find a lot of artificial flavors in beer, and I know what they taste like. I know instantly when that product has it in there. And I find that it can actually create new flavors that were unintended when you blend together those artificial extracts, and even natural extracts. So for us, it's more like, yeah, we're going to make a pie and we're actually going to use strawberries and use rhubarb in it rather than, tincture in some sort of strawberry on top of rhubarb because the strawberries weren't good when we got them, So that helps us design our flavors, and we're really passionate about that, and that's just the way we do it, and we'll never change that.
Do you ever pop in some aromatic extracts in order just to, that's a common thing, especially with something like a strawberry, which is a subtle fruit, trying to boost that aroma on top of that natural strawberry, adding some sort of extract on top of it?
We don't.
No.
And that's
stick to your guns.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and it's really hard to do it on a 100-barrel system.
Yeah.
It is a challenge to find those flavors and those blends and then have it executed properly on the actual adjuncting days, to make sure that what I developed in the kitchen, where this is the quantities that we're going to use, this is the lot of fruit that we're going to purchase, and make sure that everything's consistent down the road. It's still, kind of like up in the air until the actual blend goes together in the final product. And it's really hard. At Forager, we can climb up there, mix it in. It's super easy to source that much fruit. It's super easy to adjust in-house and like make that happen. But we felt
the size of this brew house behind us is what?
Yeah, we have a 10-barrel mash tun and 7-barrel boil kettle. Oversized mash. We'll talk about that later.
You make some stouts. You got to have one of those, right?
But it was one of those things that we wanted to have as like the connecting force between Forager and Humble Foragers. That's what we do at Forager. And there's a lot of people out there who told me that's a bad idea to take it to that level at Humble Forager. It's a different brand. You're selling to different people. There's a number of different reasons that people wanted to tell me that using artificial flavors and things like that would benefit Humble Forager. And they're right. We would get bigger yields in a lot of ways. You could, like you said, accent flavors to really make something pop a little bit more. But we wanted to stay true to the mission of what Forager's always done and show people that on a macro scale, you still can do that. And it is more challenging, absolutely. But, what in life is, good without a little bit of a challenge?
Sure. So let's talk about how you do it. I'm curious. And as I'm thinking about this, if you're working with an importer, are they bringing aseptic puree, or are they just bringing in puree that you then need to move through your process? Clearly, you've got a lot of tools at your disposal at a contract brewery, like we were talking about, to kind of, where you could work with regular puree, not aseptic, which opens up a whole additional line of fruit potential on that. But thinking about that process, like how do you go about that addition thing in order to make sure that what comes out of the brewery that you're brewing at meets that goal of what you tasted in your kitchen?
Yeah, so basically we are bringing in all sorts of different fruits. It's not all aseptic, and that means it's going to be more expensive. You got to ship it on a reefer truck, and then you got to pay for cold storage to keep that frozen at, like 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. You bring that out about a week before, and then we get the beer nice and cleaned up, like the sour base. So our sour base is built off of I'm not going to give you the exact percentages, but you can probably figure it out. It's barley, wheat, spelt, and some oats in that. And then at Octopi, they sour it with...
Oh, I'm sure that they love that, you're brewing with oats and spelt at a, large contract brewery.
Oh, yeah. And they're like, you're just covering it up with fruit anyways. But it's the recipe that we've used for Gummies Make Us Likeable for a long time. The base beer is actually great on its own. Like, if we ever wanted to do some sort of thing that wasn't overfruited with it, we probably could pull that off down there.
So you literally made a gummy mash for Gummies Make Us Likeable.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, super gnarly. And it makes it a little bit more expensive. If we just used Pilsner malt or whatever, we'd probably be getting a pretty similar result. But it's what we know, and it's what we wanted to do with that. So that's the base, and then we get that nice and cleaned up by just doing some YDOs and kind of crashing it throughout the process once it's soured and fermented. We then add all the fruit back.
And it's a normal fast lacto process.
Lacto D down there. In Forager, we actually have a proprietary lacto strain that we use here that's really, really tropical. It's kind of smells like a little bit of that tomato soup flavor, but it's also got a lot of pineapple and guava to it that come out, which we really love. We wanted to use that at Octopi, but they kind of have a house strain that they feel that they do really good with. And sometimes contract brewing, you have to defer to the contract brewery and let them kind of go with it.
Sure.
So we were fine with what the base was turning out like down there. So we then cold crash it down to 33 degrees and we inject in all these fruits. So if we're making let's go with Coastal Sunset, we're going to add in something to create the pie crust flavor. At that point, when it's down to 34 degrees, 33 degree range, we then add in our cinnamon, and we use ground cinnamon just because it mixes in better than whole stick, and we want that to go faster. But yeah, fresh ground cinnamon, and then we'll add in vanilla bean powder. Our friend Ted Jones out in California, if you don't know his name, Ted, get ready for a bunch more vanilla orders. I'll talk about him later with Forager too. He has awesome vanilla. And so we buy powderized stuff from him that he grinds up, and then it just infuses its flavor a lot faster than if we were trying to, scrape whole beans. And again, like on a 100-barrel batch, there's certain things that you just can't quite do that you normally would. So then we'll recirculate that for a day.
It's the vanilla trick. I mean, I've heard it over again. And, I think Brett Coleman Baker at Urban Artifact was one of the first to talk to me about that. He's like, that's our secret. It's vanilla. Vanilla's our secret.
Oh, yeah. It's just a wonderful flavor. And if we're creating like some sort of dessert pie, crojinta, cinnamon, and vanilla from Africa, I usually like Uganda, is a great combination to kind of create that pie crust flavor. So that's a little trick from us that if you guys are wanting to make a pie inspired sour beer, use those two varieties and you're going to get a really, really awesome. But you also have to be careful. That crojinta cinnamon is a lot more intense. So you're going to use it at a rate about 1/3 to 1/4 of what you would if you were going to use Ceylon. So Ceylon's really great for certain reasons, absolutely. But if you want that pie crust, use the crojinta. So yeah, we do that. We recirculate it, inject in the other fruit purees, keep that beer recirculating, and then we basically run it through the flash pasteurizer, get it carved on the way to the bright tank.
How long do you recirculate it typically?
Usually for about 12 hours is plenty, just to make sure that it's all homogenized when we're going to move it through. Because it gets centrifuged before that. We try to pull out a lot of the chunks. Our goal is not to make hyper thick smoothie sours. It's to make heavily fruited sours. We like to go with the term balanced intensity, and we want all those flavors to come through, but we don't want it to pour super chunky, and I don't like the beer to settle out a lot where you do have to roll the can. I want it to be a smooth consistency when it does get to your can. So
then I assume the sour base before you start this is generally a little bit higher gravity that you're then diluting down with this fruit to get into this finished kind of space.
Yep. So when we design the recipe based off of the fruit volume that we're going to put in there and the bricks on it, we end up adjusting our base sour recipe between 7.5% and 8%. That then dilutes down to 6% with the fruit, and sometimes we'll add a little bit of salted water back to it as well, just to kind of make sure that the flavor is just right in there and the consistency is correct for us. And that's all done before we put it through the pasteurizer. So then it comes out there and gets packaged up within a couple days and recirculates in the bright tank as well, to make sure that nothing else settled there before packaging, and then it goes through a tunnel at the end and gets put on pallets and shipped to your favorite liquor store in your neighborhood.
Yeah. There's a lot of process there when you're working on some of these, with some of these different fruits, especially some of those that you've sourced in different ways from different places. Are there some that you've found are more finicky than others? Some that take a little more care and attention?
Absolutely. Anything with high pectin is going to obviously cause you some problems in the centrifuge and in the can of just kind of like floating in suspension. I love the plum from Oregon fruit puree. It's so delicious. I'm not like a huge plum eater myself, but that they do something with that puree that I don't know where they're getting their plums, but like
right.
those things are awesome. But it is harder to use. It's got a ton of pectin in it, and it wants to like really suspend in solution. It doesn't want to settle out super well. So we have thought about using pectinase in there to get that to drop out, but we actually haven't committed to doing that yet. A lot of other brewers are like, oh yeah, just throw that in there, it'll work fine. But we haven't done that yet. But it doesn't mean I avoid the product. It just means that, okay, I'm going to do this. The other one that's like caused us major problems at Octopi, and I apologize to their seller team for this, is coconut cream. We've added that before because we would use like flake shredded coconut and recirculate it in a vessel off the fermenter and recirculate past the coconut. But again, 100-barrel batches, that's a lot of work. So they're constantly pulling out, soaking wet bags, like 400 pounds multiple times of coconut, trying to get that out of the tank. And they're like, this takes us like a week and a half and it's super labor intensive. Can we try something else? So I was like, yeah, let's go with coconut cream. So we added that to it. And one day it accidentally got put into the tank before going through the centrifuge. And if you put coconut into a centrifuge, it literally makes like coconut cream being ejected from the centrifuge. So it actually broke the centrifuge that day. A piece of it got pressurized so high in there that it actually like shot off like a bullet, and we were very fortunate no one was hit by that. And it was just pumping out these like long cords of essentially the coconut cream that you'd see floating in the top of one of your cans that you open. The flavor turned out great, and we got the foam stability with the pineapple that we were looking for in that particular beverage, and it was delicious. But it caused major problems like in the actual functionality of our process. So we did something really cool down there. Their lab has an emulsifier. So we took that coconut cream and we turned it into an emulsion, and then we ran that into the bright tank post centrifuge and post pasteurization. So that's where the tunnel comes into play, because sometimes you need to add something past that or else it's going to cause major problems. And even though it was in emulsion form, when the cans came out, it had kind of recoagulated into these small chunks. So if you have Coastal Sunset version 5, it's inspired by a coconut almond crumble cake that my grandma used to make with plum and blueberries. And it's absolutely delicious. But if you're lucky enough, you're going to get some white chunks floating in your beer. And it's not a problem. You're getting real coconut cream that didn't stay in the emulsion form, but actually recoagulated in there, which we haven't found out a way to not have that happen yet. But it was a really cool experiment to try. The flavor impact was great. It just isn't like the most pretty thing to look at in the can because you've got already that high pectin plum in there. It's kind of like a murkier beverage.
Right.
But some of the desserts that we eat out there in the world don't look that great. They're not all Michelin star presentation desserts. Doesn't mean they don't taste delicious. So, our goal is to make the product look beautiful. Also, like presentation of a beer in a glass is very important to us. But coconut has been a tough one for
just
us
like
to
Hetty
do.
Topper, drink from the can, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't always need to see it.
No.
Yeah.
Are there some fruits as you're using them that you find maybe need more in order to express or to find themselves, make their presence be a part of a blend? Not all fruits are exhibit that similar strength, volume to volume. Are there some of them that you find you're like, I've just gotta give them their own boost here by pushing a little more into any kind of blend?
Absolutely. So you nailed it earlier. Strawberry is the one for us that's always kind of like fallen in the back. And, strawberries can be so great when you eat them fresh, and they also can be terrible. They can taste like water.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of puree companies are buying these big, huge strawberries that they can get a lot of mass for. And at the end of the day, they're not those little tiny strawberries, that my grandma was like, just eat the little ones. Those ones have the best flavor.
So much of the fruit industry is built around what's going to look good in a store. And what looks good in a store is not necessarily what is going to taste good.
Absolutely. So strawberries have always been tough for us. Our Coastal Sunshine version 14 was strawberry, peach, and mangosteen. And mangosteen was one of those fruits that I found when I was fortunate enough to visit Thailand right before the pandemic hit. I was there in December of 2019, and I had seen the fruits in our local Asian food store before, but they were like $10 for one. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm not spending $10 on it. Over there, they're like dirt cheap, and we happened to be there like at the peak harvest of it, and I was just blown away by these fruits. So it took me about a year to find a good source for it, and we worked with a company out of California, ITI Tropicals, that was able to get us some mangosteen puree concentrate, and I think per pound it was like $16 or something crazy. So we got the sample, and it tasted really good. And in the kitchen, when I was designing the recipe, it was like, okay, we're putting a lot of strawberry in this, and the peach is coming through really nice, so we're going to pull that back a little bit, and we just can't afford to keep this product like in its price point by putting that much mangosteen in it. So we already kind of knew it was hiding in the background of the flavor, but it really was kind of like the glue that tied that peach and strawberry together in that batch. And then when we made it, the strawberry just didn't come through either. So we were kind of left with this weird peachy thing that just had these wafts of strawberry and mangosteen to it, and it wasn't really like the intended flavor that I had come up with when we first made it. And that probably was my fault, is like I should have gone heavier on those products and found a different source for a peach that could have allowed me to put a little bit more in. Because when you're designing something for the distribution market, it's very different than putting it in your tap room, where it's like, oh, I'm going to put in this super expensive product. I just have to charge more in the tap room to make the margins work there. We're making Coastal Sunshine, and that has a specific price target, and we can't, lose money on that product ideally.
Right.
So, what the goal
distributors
was
have agreed to take it at a certain price, and you need to make it at that price.
Yep. And we got to sell 100 barrels of it.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of like one of the misses for me in there. And that was, it was a bummer because I thought there was a lot of cool potential to use that mangosteen. We found another spot for it in another seltzer. But again, it was like sourcing this really cool fruit, and using it, finding somebody who gave us great product, but it just like didn't work out price wise to put in as much as I probably should have. And, I can talk to people in the future about that and be like, hey, are you open to, charging a little bit more for this? Do you think it would move, like if we wanted to do something like that again? But, so there's sometimes I would say that, strawberry is the hardest one for me. And then, that mangosteen was a tricky one too, for just a couple different reasons.
Since you have a similar kind of strategy between the seltzer side of Humble Forager and the fruited, sour side of Humble Forager, how do you differentiate between those two? Or do you find crossover between them and enjoy both? I mean, in terms of acidity, you even within your seltzers, you're using real fruit that's going to have its own acidity to it. It's still going to present, even if it doesn't taste as acidic as something like a quick sour beer would, but there's, how do you find what lane to push each thing into, and do people cross over for you?
Yeah. So the difference between like our Coastal series and our Humble Bumble series is obviously we have a sour base to start with the Coastal series, and the seltzer doesn't start off that way. So when we're designing the recipe, we're accounting for the acidity and pH of these products that we go in, and we've kind of got a sweet spot number that we aim for a balanced blend. And then we also know that we're adding honey back.
What's that number?
That number is some magical number that exists out only in my mind.
Some secrets I can't access. Okay.
Yeah. Humble Bumble is one of those products right now that I think is very different than all their seltzers on the market.
Sure.
And I'm sure people are going to be, making more of it out there. Like you've got Smooge out there just crushing it with flavor profile.
Sure.
Like they're doing an incredible thing, but we wanted it to not be quite as thick as their products. Mm-hmm. And then Untitled Arts out there doing the Florida Seltzer, which is like, I think, one of the best seltzers you possibly can buy, because it fits right in that calorie range that people are looking for. It has real fruit flavors in it, but it's not quite as thick as our stuff is.
Yeah.
So you can actually drink like a 6-pack of that if you're sitting on a pontoon boat. Humble Bumble is, I look at it as more of like, this party seltzer that you want to share. Like, there's a bunch of people who are like, no, you're wrong, I can drink this 4-pack, like, no problem. But for us, we wanted to do something that was just a little bit more intense than what Untitled Art's doing, but like fit kind of in between that and what Smooge and some of these other like heavy over the top smoothie seltzers are. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. And sweetening with honey kind of took us into this realm where
there's that 100-calorie range of like basic, super clean seltzers, and then there's the 300-calorie range of a can of Smooge, and you need to be somewhere in between those things.
Yeah, so right now in a pint can, our stuff comes in about 200 calories. So when you're looking at it, it's about 150 calories.
It's not that bad.
So it's not terrible. And there is sugar in it. It's all fruit, natural sugar. I'm personally on the keto diet at the moment because my son the other night, or in the morning, I was making breakfast, and he points to me. He's 6 years old, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, if there was a predator animal and it killed you, it would eat this part of your body first." And he pointed right to my love handle. And I was like, okay, you're not wrong. Like, I can't be mad at you. That's one of those things kids say. So I'm not drinking the sugar right now. But at the same time, I think that like we designed that product to kind of almost fit into this realm of like adult soda pops too. I don't drink soda. I never really have. But there are times that I've had one. One that I really, really loved and remembered was Ruby Red Squirt. I thought that was like unlike other sodas. It wasn't like Mountain Dew over the top sweet. And so we designed Humble Bumble version 6 to kind of imitate that flavor profile. Rio Red grapefruit juice, a little bit of passion fruit in there, and then pink dragon fruit to pull it really nicely into that category of, bright pink. And then we put hibiscus flowers in that and wildflower honey. And it really kind of, people are like, yeah, that's really grapefruit forward. And I was like, yep, that's the goal with this one. We want it to be that way. Version 1 was kind of built off of like Orangina soda, blood orange, tangerine, that beautiful calamansi lime, and then staghorn sumac, and a little bit of orange blossom honey in that one. So the other thing about it is like we use flowers in all of our Humble Bumbles, and the flavor impact isn't going to be super huge, but there are some other benefits that you can get from, throwing in different teas for tannic structure, things like that kind of like build back. That's
okay. Now we're getting really weird, which is the best part of this because I love it when we get really weird. Let's talk a little bit more about that. But first, from the rotatable pickup tube on Rogue Brewing's pilot brew house to the integrated hopbacks on Sierra Nevada's twin prototyping brew houses, SS Brewtech is taking technology they invented, working with world-renowned industry veterans, and made them available to every craft brewer. To learn more about SS Brewtech's innovation list, head on over to ssbrewtech.com. Also, are you looking for the tools to make your next improvements in process and quality control? The Mettler Toledo InPro 8630i is the ideal sensor for combined color and turbidity measurements and lautering, filtration, and phase shift operations. Robust, compact, and easy to handle, it supports consistency in beer processing. The InTap portable oxygen meter gives you readings wherever you need them. It's flexible in production for verification, while purging, or for troubleshooting. Whenever you need it, it's your perfect helping hand. Contact Mettler Toledo today to find out more. So teas and flowers.
Yes.
On top of these intense, fruit flavors.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, we're going to talk about barrel-aged beers at some point here in the future, but I can't get off this topic yet because that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I was sitting in Prague with Annie, and we were trying to conceptualize what we wanted to do for a seltzer. And after enough Staro
That's a curious
Ramen,
place to do it.
It really was. It was like, I need lager to be creative.
Hey,
so
typical brewer.
Yeah, it was. It just kind of like came to me because we use honey so much at Forager for all of our mix firm. We like bottle condition with different honeys, and we use it in a lot of our base stouts at the end of the boil, things like that. And it was like, oh, let's do this. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, humble. And then I just was like, Humble Bumble. Well, bumblebees don't make honey, but it rolls off the tongue. Maybe we could do this. And then what do bees? The bees need flowers to make this. So the whole kind of like concept of the brand was like just developed on a night, like sitting on a terrace in Prague. And we came up with all these flavor profiles, and I was like, oh yeah. And then this flower source would like really work well with that. So That took a little bit of trial and error and research to figure out which dried flowers and teas we wanted to use. But one that I really love is in our Humble Bumble version 7, it's a Magdalena River Mango from Colombia, which is a really, really awesome product. We love to use that one. We also love the Alfonso Mango from India, but for different reasons. And then we lumped on top of that some mandarin orange, a little dash of calamansi lime, and then we threw in a whole bunch of chamomile flowers. And that just paired so perfectly with the mango. It was like this seamless transition in flavor where we went mango, citrus up front, and then it smoothed out to this kind of chamomile honey infused tea vibe at the end. And it just showcased like that these do really add something else to it. And I think that no one else is really doing that. I think like Collective Arts is doing like a line of like hard teas and stuff like that, which are really interesting. And I thought that was neat that they were going that route too. But nobody's putting tea in seltzer right now that I know of. There could be some other people out there. But yeah, we also wanted to kind of go with that like idea of like foraging. So like staghorn sumac grows all over around here. And if you know what it tastes like, essentially when you steep it in warm water, it gives off this really great lemonade flavor. So for that particular batch, we've got the sweetness of the tangerine, the bitterness of the blood orange, a little bit of the acidity from the calamansi lime, and then that staghorn sumac kind of floats in the middle of this, like we're going to give it a little bit of lemon zest here too. And then you give it the glue, which is the orange blossom honey, which has this really, really beautiful citrus tone to it already. So these things have a lot of ingredients. It seems like maybe I just threw them all together and hope it tasted good.
Right.
But it's really about recipe like development and concentration on like what you need to fill in those gaps for a well-rounded product that has balanced intensity. And that one's just been a huge hit for us, and it worked out super well. So the other one that's really fun that we have right now is version 8. And it is pineapple with a little bit of morello cherries, which are nice and tart to kind of balance out the sweetness of the pineapple. And then we threw a little bit of calamansi lime in there because it always works great in beers and seltzers. And then we threw in honeysuckle flowers, which have this really nice spice tone. So it kind of turned it into almost like a pineapple upside down cake, like holiday spiced cake vibe to it. And without that flour in there, we wouldn't have got that. So it was one of those ingredients that's like, okay, yep, this stays true to the brand, but also, goes off in this other direction that kind of creates another flavor. So we really love using the flour source in there. And it's a little bit tough sometimes to get it passed through TTB approval. You got to submit some extra paperwork there, but in the end, it works out great.
Sure, I can see that in terms of trying to build a beer or a hard seltzer that has these layers of flavors and these ways to kind of move through it. As you're mentioning it, especially you're talking about time. And how that sip evolves over time. And I think that's an interesting way to look at this. It's something that we don't always think about as we're designing beers. It's not just what that initial intense flavor is or what that aroma is, but it's also how, as that sip sits in your mouth and after you swallow and how it sits on the palate, what that does. And it sounds to me as if this, especially as you start thinking about tea and herbal kinds of components to it, they tend to have a drying effect, which is especially when you're talking about something that could be this sweet up front, helps make them more and more drinkable, helps that person crush can after can of that.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of inspiration for me has come from products like, I would say, like Pliny the Elder is an awesome hazy double IPA. But what it does for me is like you drink that first sip and it tastes like I'm sorry, it's not a hazy double IPA. It's a West Coast IPA,
sure.
Which is what I really like to drink. And you take that first sip and it kind of hits on all those points. But then as it washes over your palate and dissipates and you exhale and inhale again, you get different waves of characters of flavors. And there's so many West Coast IPAs that are great. They're drinkable. They're super nice, but they don't do that thing that changes and evolves on your palate over time. And I think Vinny is like a master at that in his recipe designs. He gets this thing that hits you up front with this, and then it offers you this through your experience and finishes you over here. Corey from Side Project does the same exact thing with his stouts. So why people love them so much? They're not the most intense. They're not the most thick up front, but what they do is over time just evolve and change on your palate and give you this full rounded experience of flavors, textures, aromas, and everything that just kind of keeps on going. And it's a really, really great recipe architect that I think can do that. And that's what we're striving to do with a simple product like seltzer. Yeah.
Well, I love that you can make hard seltzer cool like that. That's fun. Well, you just mentioned stouts, and so let's use that as a segue to kind of pivot into that. So this is, the stout program at Forager is probably what most of the hipsters know you for, and this is part of not the humble Forager brand, but Forager, because these are 750 milliliter bottles that you can sell out there into the world. And so you still produce these at a small scale right here out of the Forager brew pub.
Yes.
Talk to me about, how you envisioned this program, from the start, and how you decided you were going to make barrel aged beers, because, it's a small brew pub in Rochester, Minnesota. It wasn't like people are clamoring for very sweet, heavily adjuncted barrel aged stouts. I mean, imagine that's not your average brew pub consumer coming in and saying, "Hey, this is what I want." But you guys are, beer fanatics also, and I imagine you wanted to try your hand at making these. Talk to me about how you started that, and then how you've kind of managed that and continued to grow that as the acclaim for your barrel aged beers has grown.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of the history of stout for me was, I grew up in Wisconsin. There wasn't a lot. It was Tyranina and Central Waters who did that. And once I moved to Minnesota, Founder's Breakfast Stout was kind of like the thing that I loved. And we developed a recipe called Sherpa Survival Kit that was kind of based off of that similar concept.
Sure, so I had some of that last night.
Yeah, it's a stout that's not popular anymore. It's a dry, big American stout that then has coffee added to it for an extended aging period, so it gets a little bit more roasty. It's not just those bright aromatics of the coffee, a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of cocoa nib in there. So when we opened, it was like, people were like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And now when we make Sherpa, like, our stout lovers are like, "I don't really like this. It's dry." It's like, it's a regular stout.
Right.
But we still make that beer once or twice a year. It is kind of one of our main flagship beers, if we want to call it that here. But that then led us into this realm of like brewing the stouts that we make here. I worked at a restaurant called Nosh Restaurant and Bar, and at that time they were in Lake City. Now they're in Winona, and if you're driving up the Mississippi River, you're absolutely going to want to stop for lunch or dinner at Nosh Restaurant and Bar. They are absolutely fantastic, and their head chef, Greg Jaworski, was a big beer trader when I worked there. And so he and a couple of his friends introduced me to a lot of barrel-aged stouts from around the country, where I was able to start tasting things that I didn't have access to because I was spending all my money on brewing beer.
Yeah.
So I was making these recipes, in my garage and at his kitchen and all these other places. But I really started to see these other flavors that existed in some of these really sought-after stouts from around the country that I didn't have access to living in the Midwest. So that inspired me to start brewing those beers, and working again from kind of like a culinary thought process. It was all about, like simmering these stouts, like slowly reducing them down like you would like a demi-glace for like dosing over something, where you're taking something that's essentially pretty thin and you're reducing it down and concentrating the flavors. Some people do it very fast and intensely. Some people do it very slow and methodically. We do both because we find that both have a reason in blending. So essentially, like, there I started sourcing from the really cool little apiary. It was about 45 minutes away from the restaurant. They did barrel-aged honey in little 5-gallon barrels. So it actually worked perfect for me to experiment with my first barrel aging. And this was long before Forager was even like a thought. So I've been making barrel-aged old ales, barrel-aged wheat wine, barrel-aged stouts in these honey-soaked barrels for a long time. And for me, I realized very quickly that when we were like drilling nails and like pulling nails out of these barrels, that like they weren't tasting like the beers that we were drinking, but I was pulling those nails like 4 months. And it was like, okay, this isn't ready yet. And then we just let it sit, and we let it sit for another season. And all of a sudden you've got a 5-gallon barrel of old ale that sat there for 18 months, and you pull that nail out because you kind of like put it in the back. And it's like, this is amazing, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. So I made those beers just to, give away to my friends at bottle shares, essentially.
Sure.
And do that. And people are like, dude, this is great. So I was trying to open a brewery, finally moved to Rochester. And at that point, the barrel-aged beer was still sitting in barrels. I still actually have one corny keg of our old barrel-aged wheat wine sitting in the back that I'm just going to let sit there until my 1-year-old turns 21 and be like, how is this? Yeah. But it was one of those things where I had already developed my process for that. And then when we got here, it was like, go. We're brewing beer for a restaurant. And like, I wanted to make barrel aged beer, and one of our brewers at the time, Zach Dunbar, who's now with Lua. If you haven't been to Lua, absolutely check them out. They're crushing it. And he was like, we got to get this going. And I was like, I know, but we also got to keep our tap lines full. We're a new restaurant. We're super busy. Like, this is crazy. So we started to put some beer away into barrels, and I wanted to source a lot of those small format barrels from that apiary. They unfortunately stopped making their barrel aged honey because the guy who owned it, his daughter went away to college. So we're all of a sudden like, okay, we got to find new small format barrels because we're a restaurant. We can't drive a forklift around in here, so everything needs to be hand stacked. So we were using small format barrels simply because it was like worked for us physically in our space. And we started off with that, and then we made a contract with Few Distilling down in Evanston, Illinois. So we would drive down a tow-behind motorcycle trailer and fill the trailer up with basically as many barrels we could stuff inside of that thing. And we'd drive them home, and we'd usually have like 2 to 3 fermenters full of barrel-aged potential beer, and we fill those things up, put them in the back, and like that's where our program started. We didn't start going to full-size barrels until about 2 years in. Everything was small format, and yeah, we were pretty limited on what we could blend out of that. I think that some of the beers we put together were very good, and we had a couple people locally who did maple syrup in barrels, so we were able to source like local maple syrup barrels, which gave us other nice threads, and a couple of these honey producers put their honey in barrels for us so that we could actually then kind of, create those flavors that I'd been doing on homebrew level. We put together some like really fun blends, but as our program has evolved, we also developed a lot of base stout recipes. So we don't brew a beer and put a name on it and then put it in a fermenter, put it in a barrel and call it that beer. We've only done that one time, and it actually worked out great because that barrel aging process actually turned out perfect. That beer was called Crema, and it was a coconut vanilla stout. But what we normally do is brew a bunch of different base recipes. Some are a little thicker, some are a little thinner. We put some of those thicker ones in smaller format barrels because we found that those age a little bit better in those barrels. And we put some of the beers that finish around, I'd say like 1056 to like 1065 into large format barrels because we find that pickup of oak is better in that process.
So that's interesting, and I don't want to just keep glossing over that because a lot of the barrels that are around us right now are 15-gallon barrels, and as you just said, you're specifically putting a higher gravity base into these smaller 15-gallon barrels because it behaves differently in that small barrel.
Absolutely. In the Midwest here, we get a lot of like push and pull seasonally in our barrels. It gets really, really cold in some of the spaces that we age in the winter, and then really, really hot in the summer. So we focus our small format barrels in those spaces so that we can make sure that really, really viscous liquid is getting pushed and pulled as much as it possibly can through the oak itself. And we just get better pickup that way. We found that some of our thicker beers that are in large format barrels just don't pick up the barrel character we want as quickly. So we usually aim to put a little bit of our thinner base beers in those. And then at the end of the day, when we decide, hey, we're going to produce some barrel aged beer, we have things that are turning the corner. For us, that's 14 months. We usually taste things at around 12 months to like make sure that they're like headed in
even
direction.
The small barrels.
Even the small barrels.
Wow, you can get that many months out of these small barrels.
We love it. I think the longer we can sit in the small barrels, the better. You lose a ton of liquid to evaporation, so sometimes you're sitting with like a 15-gallon barrel that you only pull 9 gallons out of in the end. But like the liquid that's in there is absolutely amazing. So the longer we can let it sit, the better, in my opinion. We also like kind of umami flavors to be blended into the threads of our stouts. Like, it's not the focus of the flavor profile, but again, it's that thing where it's like we're trying to layer these flavors at the end. So back to what I was saying about we don't brew a beer and then call it that beer down the road. We brew base beers that are different like colors of art for us, or like colors of paint. When we want to brew or blend a beer, we have a blank canvas and we go into it. We search through the barrels that are of ripeness for us, which is usually over 14 months and doesn't get much older than 28 months. And for all those beers, we just taste through them. TJ here is our lead barrel blender, and he basically makes notes on everything, like from super positive, and he's super harsh on our beers too.
Sure.
He's like the greatest critic of our beers, which is what keeps our program like high end. So he'll make all these notes. We'll look through those, and then we'll start to be like, okay, we're going to make a beer that we want to add nuts to. So let's not take our best barrels. Let's take the ones that needed a little bit of help around these edges, that weren't fit for a single barrel, for a non-adjunct blend, for a double barrel program, and fill in those gaps with different adjuncts that like we want to use for this one. And then we'll be like, okay, let's set aside all the beers that are going to be great for vanilla, because Nillers is kind of like our flagship beer. I think it's what like made us nationally known, and that's our vanilla bean barrel aged double stout that is always aged on 5 different growing regions of vanilla. So we'll set those aside, and then once we're ready to blend it, pull those out. And what we did this year was my favorite thing with vanilla that we've ever done. Our Nillers release this year has 6 different variants of vanilla beers. So I think there's a lot of breweries out there that make IPA, and they blend different hops in it. And some of their bases are different. Some are pretty similar. But you're going to either get like Nelson, Citra, Rawaka in this one, or you're going to get, Talus, Columbus, and Strata in this one on the same base beer. And people are like, oh, I really like these kind of hops. I don't think vanilla beans get the same credit as how different each different region is in their flavor profiles and the impacts on the aroma and everything like that. So we took a big, huge blend this year and made 4 of our base Nillers out of the same exact base. And then the only thing that was different were the vanilla beans that went into it. So TJ's been scraping caviar for like a month and a half to get enough in there.
You decided what the blend was going to be that was going to support vanilla, period. Some blend of small 15-gallon barrels, some of those nice ones, as well as some of the bigger format barrels that was going to build this perfect base for each of these different vanilla expressions, to showcase on.
Yes. So what we like to do is take a percentage, usually around, I'd say 60 to 80% of our blends come from large format barrels. They kind of bulk it out, but then our small format barrels give in these amazing threads of flavor that we can't get that out of the large format barrels. So we're always blending in the small format barrels to accent different flavors that are either missing or we think would really shine in one of these blends that we put together. As I said before, we were sourcing from Few Distillery before. Now we're fortunate enough to work with Rock Filter Distilling. They're out of Spring Grove, Minnesota. They're about 20 minutes away from a stave mill that provides staves for all sorts of whiskey companies. It's Minnesota oak. Goes into their distillery where they grow all of their own heirloom grains for their whiskey. So it's basically 100% Minnesota product that we're getting from the oak. Obviously, we use a variety of different base malts that aren't grown here in Minnesota, but we really, really love these barrels, and they work so well for our barrel-aged products. So that's kind of like the blending goal there, is to find large format and small format that go together and create a really great final blend that fits our intended goal in the end.
Sure. So then you build this big thing for Nillers this year, all of this base, and you decide to do individual vanilla expressions then for what? Multiple different bottle releases, all of the same beer?
Yeah, so essentially we have a 6-pack of vanilla beers coming out on April 30th. And it's super, super exciting to, put that together, because we were soul searching as what Forager really, really is. And it just kind of came to me that it's there's a brewery that loves vanilla. We got our name for it, and we've got Ted Jones on our side to get us these amazing beans from all over the world. And there's some really great IPA producers that get to blow up awesome hops and use that. And we produce very, very good hazy IPA. I'm not going to say it's super world class like some other breweries are, but I think that our barrel-aged stout program is, and we wanted to show people that with the same base, you can have such a drastically different flavor. Because I think most people in vanilla, it's you're probably exposed to Madagascar, maybe Tahitian, a couple of those other vanillas, but there's really, really small boutique micro lots from around the world, similar to coffee, that's going to express tons of different flavor. So, for instance, this year we chose our single origin variety from the island of Comoros off the east coast of Africa. and it was like that toasted marshmallow that everybody really loves. It was a really, really amazing bean this year. The cure and the harvest was great. So we went with that. But then when you look at what we did for our Africas, which is spelled AFRICAZZZZZ, and I'm just going to throw this out there in the middle of this. We are not in support of Russia at all. And what they're doing, we've been using the letter Z for 5 years plus, and it means vanilla beans, and we love you, Ukraine. So yeah, there's been some people who are like, you know that you're supporting Russia by putting Z's on your beer. It's like, you don't know our brand then, because we've been doing this long before that was a thing. So yeah, I just want to clear the air on that. But yeah, so the beans grown in Africa that we got this year, we got this amazing bean from Tanzania, and it smelled like turned over fresh loam. It was like so earthy and so different than anything. And that thread comes through so predominantly in that base beer. So you'll drink the Comoros and be like, oh, this is a vanilla beer. It tastes like toasted marshmallow. Reminds me of Hanji, whatever. And it's great. But then we wanted to showcase that there's all these other things, just like, East Kent Golding is an amazing hop when used in the right place, featured in this direction. So I'm really excited to see people's response to this year. And if you're up at the Craft Brewers Conference, feel free to come down, because we're going to have all 6 varieties on tap throughout the week, as long as it doesn't cash out super quick. You should be able to come down to Forager, check out our tap room. Sorry to pump this, but
hey, go for it. Go for it. I mean, who doesn't want to drink 6 different varieties of barrel-aged imperial vanilla stouts all next to each other?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
we also will be releasing some really great new mixed culture saisons as well.
Yeah. And you'll have lagers for the brewers too.
And we'll have lager.
Yeah. So Nillers in this kind of format, 6 bottles that all the beer geeks will have to try all next to each other, because that's the way that people generally consume these things. Sounds like some fantastic parties that are going to happen down here and down the road. But let's talk about some of the other barrel-aged beers that you make, that also explore other flavors, because clearly, as we've established, you love building layered, nuanced flavors using all sorts of ingredients that might be out of the box for typical brewers. Let's talk about some of those ways you build other flavors into stouts.
Yeah, for sure. So we're super fortunate to have a kitchen in-house here with like industrial, ovens and things like that. So
a wonderful kitchen. The food is fantastic here, by the way. Yeah.
And that allows us to like roast all of our ingredients and toast them fresh in house, which I think makes a really big difference. So for instance, like a beer like dribbles or pudding dribbles that we make. Right now, our lead cellarman, Jake, is down in Amish country in Cashton, Wisconsin with an IBC tote, and he is driving back IBC tote of maple sap, which is, if you don't know what maple sap is, it's what the base of maple syrup is. It's the water that drains out of the sugar maple tree. And what our Amish friends do down there is they boil that sap down in their really cool old Canadian boiler. It's all fire driven, and it's a really cool experience to watch them make syrup. But what we do is we bring it back and use it as the brewing water in a lot of beers. So during this time when the sap is running, every Monday we go down and pick up 300 gallons of maple sap, and then we brew barrel-aged beers with it, or pudding dribbles if you've ever had that. So that starts off as our base. So we've already got this really extra sweet water that goes into it, and it has this really cool woody character as well.
Right.
So
I know Sean Lawson does something like that at Lawson's for one of his beers, where they brew the base brewing water is maple sap.
Yeah, it works out great, and it's a total like Forager brand centric thing where we go down there and do this, and we always look forward to it every year.
Why not make it even harder than
Yep. It'd be nice if we had a little bit bigger system. We could just have a tanker truck bring it up here, but Jake gets to do a 4-hour round trip every Monday for the springtime, which I think he likes. But yeah, after the beer,
great time to listen to the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast.
Exactly. Yep. So once he gets back and we finish like fermenting this beer, we have a recirculation tank that's like outside of the fermenter. When we first started, we would dump all the adjuncts into the tank because we didn't have this vessel, and we just kind of roll CO2 through it and try to get all the adjuncts in there. That was a good way to do it, but the downfalls of that aren't necessarily flavor impact unless you're over steeping a product. So we'd throw in, for pudding dribbles, an example, coconut, cocoa nibs, vanilla beans, coffee, all these other things at different points in time. But then what happens to your staff essentially is when that beer tastes right, you got to move it off those adjuncts like instantaneously at that time. And that's just not really convenient for anybody because that time might happen at 3 a.m. on Sunday night. So what we started doing instead is we have this recirculation tank and we toast coconut and we let it cool down so that it's not super hot when we go in there. We've had problems by putting hot ingredients into the beer as well. So once it's cooled back down to room temperature, we then inject in some of the base beer onto that coconut and recirculate it in the adjunct vessel. We then, after we have a little tasting valve off the side of it, so we can taste it throughout that process. And then we inject it back into the base beer that's been off yeast. So we then can taste the final blend of what's going on in there. And it's like, okay, so here's the base beer with one run on coconut. And then we're like, okay, we got enough coconut in the base. Now we're going to go on to nuts. So then we roast the hazelnuts or, pecans or whatever nut that we're going to use in that beer. Fresh in house, grind it up fresh in house, and then throw it in that adjunct tank and recirculate it. And what really helps there is you can manage the amount of time and contact that you're putting on each ingredient.
Singular ingredient. Okay.
Yes. So then you can start really layering those flavors better. For instance, like
now that's a lot more tank time than
absolutely
to do that this kind of iterative method, building and building and building. But
it works out for a better product in the end. The labor is more, but it's like more manageable.
Yeah.
You can get it done during your work shift because at the end of it, it's like, if we're getting close, we'll inject that beer back into the tank and get it off adjuncts overnight because walnuts is a great example. The skin on walnuts is very tannic. So if you overdo it on that, you're going to get this really tannic structure in the beer. So you got to be careful with that. Same with certain types of cocoa nibs. A short recirculation is great, but if you go too long, it's going to get really astringent. And then, coffee is kind of the obvious one where if you're throwing coffee into the tank and you only want it to have 14 hours of contact time, like you better have everything else ready to go and a staff member there to transfer that beer off. And hopefully, like nothing gets clogged up or messed up along the way if you're full of adjuncts in your fermenter, or you're going to oversteep. So doing a like external recirculation is a huge recommendation from mine if you're into high adjunct stuff, because it's going to allow you to, for what you want your flavor profile to be, hit it kind of right on the nuts. Whereas if you're throwing them all in together, it's just going to kind of do its own thing and you might not get the extraction of one thing that you wanted and over extract another.
And that's an interesting process too. So you're pulling out into a recirculation, external vessel, doing a very kind of high intensity infusion in that vessel and then dosing that high intensity infusion back into the main vessel.
Yes. And we layer it individual adjuncts at a time. So we hit coconut first usually, and then we then go with like
why coconut nut first?
Because it usually plays like this big base flavor, and like we want to layer the things that are like dashes. Like if you're gonna make some sort of like cake, you're going to finish it with cinnamon. You're going to like toss that on the top.
Yeah.
You don't want to start with something like that and then be like, oh shoot, we missed that because it was overwhelmed by this. So we usually go with like the backbone fillers, and we feel that like usually in our blends, that's the coconut, the nut, cocoa nibs are kind of like where we start. And then if we're going to add spices and vanilla, we finish off with those to kind of accent the flavors on top of it. And coffee is always the last one for us just because it can really overwhelm easily. So we want to make sure that that's like done just right too. So if you don't have an external recirculation vessel, you can get them for very good prices. There's a number of different companies out there that offer different models of them, but they'll be super beneficial. And it takes a little while to figure out how to use it properly and what your system needs. But that is probably one of the best things if you like doing heavy adjuncted stuff to have. I've got friends at other breweries who don't do that. They put it into the bright tank and they jump back and forth. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. You don't need the piece, but for us,
recirculating through the main tank, through this external dosing vessel, another common method. Sure.
Yeah. So that there's a lot of ways you can do it. That's just what we've found works best for us.
I imagine over time you then build out some parameters that tend to work, more consistently. But then again, you're right. There's year-to-year variation in some of these ingredients, and so sometimes still maintaining this kind of process gives you fine-tuned control over that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually use that.
I guess it makes sense too if you're trying a new ingredient of some sort. Then that's a very cautious way to move forward on it.
For sure. Like last year we did chicatanas, which was if you're not familiar with what a chicatana is, it's a giant flying ant in this area of Mexico that during the rainy season they get washed out of their homes and they're flying all over, and people catch them with butterfly nets and roast them, and they're a huge part of like mole sauce seasonally down there. It's a delicacy. One of our kitchen staff members, her mother lives down there and sends us chicatanas every year. So a lot of people think that like we made that as a gimmick beer, and what we did as a mistake last year was not include some of the raw ants in the bottle purchase of that, so you could taste what it actually tastes like, because I don't think anyone has a reference of like what that ant tastes like. But we actually,
by the way, there is a special ingredient story in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine along with a recipe from Austin. So for all of you all who are subscribers, you can pop back into our archives and check that out and brew it yourself if you want to make a homebrew style batch of that.
Absolutely. And you should. It's a super, super cool product. And, that's what we like to do here also. And that kind of shadows into, Humble Forager. We want to use ingredients that people aren't using that have great flavor impact, but you nailed it. It was like, we need to use this recirculation vessel because we've never brewed with chicatanas before and we never recirculated on them. So we don't want there to be some weird flavor that comes out of this. We want to authentically get the flavor of those ants into the beer, and then we want it to be done. So, and
that's clever too, because it's in its own vessel. And so if something goes terribly wrong, you just don't dose it back in.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, you can taste
you don't lose all that
quick.
Expensive batch of, beer, or, get into that problem of, we've got so much money sunk into this that we're going to need to figure out how to make something, even if we're not entirely happy about it.
Yeah. And for us,
how big is that tank? How much beer goes into it for that high intensity infusion?
For us, we have, 10 hectoliter tanks that usually get filled with like 250 gallons of beer ish. And the recirculation vessel is a 60-gallon tank. So we like to kind of pull out small doses of that to make sure that, it works out well. We could get something bigger, but then we're left with like a lot of headspace in the fermenter, and just works good for our size.
Yeah.
And it also, we use that tank if we like did a single barrel select or a double barrel select, you can pressurize it. So we actually can just put in a barrel-aged stout into that tank, fill it pretty much to the brim, and then, package off of that tank as well. So we use it for all sorts of different stuff. I think the one we have is from Stout Tanks and Kettles. It was like $1,600, so no brainer. It's a pretty easy vessel. It's not like jacketed or insulated or anything, but you don't really need that. So at least for us, we do everything at ambient temperature. So some people like to do it at cold temperatures, and we've found that if we need that, just roll it into the cooler, and there you go. So there are some things that we've messed around with that. We haven't seen results that like prove that we need to have everything cold though.
Sure. We've talked about vanilla. We've talked about chicatanas. Are there any other ingredients that you find are really, really fun in barrel-aged stouts and that you have enjoyed exploring?
Yeah. For me, I think coffee is one of them. Coffee can be tricky, and we get to work with Mastra out of California. They make awesome stuff, and we built a really great relationship with them. We use their coffee in our coffee shop here. It's one of the things that we don't do that's like hyper local. Obviously, chicatanas aren't either, but it's a family affair with that one. Mastra Coffee is great. Their roasting process is awesome, and they've been able to source us some really, really cool coffees. We got some Bambito Estate Geisha the past couple of years that we've been using in our stouts, and we're actually going to transition to using that coffee into a mixed firm beer and a lager this year, because I think the subtleties of what makes Geisha so great are kind of lost in stout. You don't get like a lot of coffee. It's more of a floral tea flavored coffee in a lot of ways. So we're gonna mess with that in some of our mixed firm stuff and make like a coffee lager with it, just to kind of like showcase like how cool this coffee is, that it's not like roasty and earthy and chocolatey really at all.
Right.
So that's always another challenging ingredient. That and cocoa nibs. The biggest one I think for you guys out there, as far as like using cocoa nibs in a beer, if you have something that like is a little lacking in body, throw cocoa nibs in it. It's a bodybuilder, and it like doesn't really back sweeten, but adds these great layers that I think, again, regionality is the big one. People are like, oh yeah, get cocoa nibs, and it's like, where are they from? Because they're drastically different. It's kind of like our passion for vanilla beans from different regions, cocoa nibs from different regions is the same exact kind of thing. Same with coffee. So those are reasons that those ingredients I think are so special to me, is that you say coffee and it means one thing to a lot of people, but if you're into it, it's such a diverse product, and it's really fun to play with those ingredients, especially in our base stouts. So yeah, cocoa nibs, bodybuilder.
When it comes to using coffee, how do you go about using it? Are you using whole bean steeping, or clearly you're going to recirc and do your normal process on that? But do you grind it? What does that look like? And you imagine you're using it at ambient temperature, like you said.
So coffee we actually do cold.
Oh, you do cold.
Yep,
Okay.
Coffee is one that we feel cold is really the only way to go with it. You're going to extract a lot less acidity from it. And we've messed around with a lot of different ways of using coffee over the past 6.5 years. And what we found is the best is to blend your coffees. So work with your local roaster, whoever you're buying your coffee from. Tell them what your goal is in your beer, and be like, I'm going to make this beer. It's going to have these other adjuncts in it, and I want coffee to be like kind of the glue that binds it. And they will help you put together a roast level and like an ingredient source. So they're going to be like, oh, we think our Ecuador coffee is really great, and this Peruvian coffee is going to be really good in these two realms. So for me, Peruvian coffee is like really mapley. It has that nice maple character. So we try to source that. But also having a friend in the coffee roasting industry is super important. So we work with those guys. We're like, hey, this is our recipe plan. Can you help us figure out which coffees are going to do best for this? And then with that, we also say, hey, like, how would you guys make this coffee? Because they're the professionals in coffee. So use people when you can. And we do whole bean and ground. So we usually do a blend of it. We found that when you grind it, you're opening up a little bit too much to like potential those kind of green peppery flavors.
Sure.
Because you're exposing it to a lot of oxygen. But without grinding it, you're not quite getting the full effect of the coffee. Like the whole bean recirculation is awesome for aromatics. And you get really, really nice characters from the roast, but you're not bringing in like that intensity of coffee. So again, what's your end goal? If you really want intense coffee, like Sherpa Survival Kit, it's all ground. If we want something that's just a subtle character of the aromas of coffee to blend in with some nuts, but we don't want that dark roast in there because the base beer already possesses that, then we'd use whole bean. But most of our beers use a blend of it. So we'll recirculate on some whole beans, and then we'll finish it off if we need to with a little bit of ground coffee also.
Fantastic. That's fascinating. I love it. It's just a contextual approach to coffee where you can do it in multiple different ways. You're the first person who ever told me that they do it that way.
Yeah,
but
we
it
just
makes a
found
lot of
over
sense.
time that worked best for us, and it was nice. So
that's cool. Well, let's zoom out. We're getting on in time here. Let's talk about the big picture. You as you all started this business, you have this focus on local. You have this focus on forage. You have this focus on ingredients in general. Even the kitchen is 100% scratch kitchen. It's very focused on doing things the right way with ingredients with integrity and having an integrity in that kind of process. You've tried to approach all of the business like that also. But what's the big picture goal? What do you hope to achieve with Forager and then Humble Forager also?
Yeah, with Forager, our impact is very localized. So we didn't really talk about our mixed firm program, which is totally fine because nobody cares. They would have turned off the podcast anyways. We love making mixed firm beer.
We just did a whole slew of
episodes
in Belgium, and we talked about all sorts of that stuff. So,
absolutely. We have a lot to talk about that. So if you'll ever have me back on the show, we could do a little segment on that too. But for those beers, we don't buy any purees, anything like that. It's all local fruit from real farmers. So Forager's impact is to give back to our local area. We want to use as much local stuff as we can, and we want to give that money back. And we're going to provide an awesome space for people who come to the Mayo Clinic and have, very, very intense medical procedures going on with themselves or their families. A very, very safe, comfortable place to come and kind of get away from that and enjoy great localized food from here with inspiration from around the world. But then at the same time, we just want to kind of give back to Southeast Minnesota and the surrounding states that we support, and they support us. Humble Forager's goal is to give back as well. So with the Humble Bumble line, we really want to be able to give a good percentage of our profits back to rehabbing like native wildflower and pollinator species habitats. With the coastal series, we want to donate to rehab of streams and river like decay and embankment problems that are happening. And with our IPA line, we want to do trail rehab and trail design, trail builds, things like that. So we just want to donate some of our money back to the reasons that we got into this industry in the first place, which is loving outdoors, loving nature, and trying to work symbiotically with that. I feel that there's a lot of problems in the world that are about humans, and I think the one thing that we do share is this planet, and we all got to take care of it, and we kind of overlook that a lot of times. So Humble Forager's goal is to bring light of that and give money back to that with the support of that company, and show people that on a large scale, you still can do things with the same focus as you would on a small scale. It's why we won't use artificial lab-created flavors in those beers, why we'll always support real farmers, real people growing these products, and we want to give back to that. And that's our big goal with Humble Forager, and it's a lot more work, but I think it has a greater impact. So that's always been kind of how we feel here at Forager, and we hope that our customers feel the same. And if you don't, that maybe we can change your mind a little bit to see the light.
Fantastic. And that is a great place to bring this to a close. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. Since 1847, raw malt has been a benchmark of quality and consistency for brewers. Think outside the puree box with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Arrived is craft beer's most trusted point-of-sale system. Put SS Brewtech's advances to work in your brew house, and the Mettler Toledo InPro 8630i is your perfect helping hand. If you enjoy this podcast each week, we'd love your support. Go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button, and of course, if you're planning a brewery, head on over to breweryworkshop.com for information on our next workshop in Portland, Oregon this July. Austin, if you want to learn more about Forager or Humble Forager, where do they find both?
So you're going to go to humbleforagerbrewing.com or foragerbrewing.com, and you basically can follow us on any of our hashtags, Forager Brewery, Humble Forager Brewery. On Instagram, follow us on the little stories there, and we're actually going to be traveling around the country this year for Humble Forager, so we'll hopefully see you guys in your hometowns, and we'll share a glass of fresh seltzer with you.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast, Austin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.